So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time to join us tonight. My name is Ingrid Boudet, and I'm founder of No More Noise Toronto, and we are very excited to share with you a deep dive into vehicle noise, a legal study. Motor vehicle noise is the number one noise source for people, and as we know, it moves from A to B and here and there, and it's not like construction, which is stationary. It's not like amplified sound, so it's a beast all unto itself. And I've been looking at the noise laws for a number of years, but I haven't had the time to dig into it. Well, tonight we're going to dig into them because amplified sound, for example, is a municipal issue where motor vehicle noise covers federal, provincial, and municipal. So we're going to dig into all of that. I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and we're going to go through a little bit of an introduction, and then I'm going to pass it over to Patrick. So let's get started here. Okay. So I'm just going to make sure that I have everybody's face up here. Excellent. Okay. So we are doing motor vehicle noise. There we are. So housekeeping, we're going to quickly cover that. I'm going to do a little introduction of No More Noise Toronto in case you haven't joined us before, talk about the University of Toronto. Then we're going to do the deep dive into vehicle noise, have a Q&A session and a bit of a discussion. And then I'm going to quickly go into the Motor Vehicle Task Force and a wrap up at about 5 minutes to 10 minutes to the hour. So No More Noise Toronto is focused on the noises that wake us up, keep us up, and disturb us day and night. We're grassroots. We've grown to over 1,550 supporters. We're engaged in the civic process at City Hall. Many of the people on the call tonight actually made deputations at different times to different committees, and we've had an impact. And our collaborative approach has led to discussions with 4 city divisions. And bylaw enforcement is the municipal licensing and standards. And then we have the police. And so those two apply to the motor vehicle noise that we're talking about tonight, public health, and also Toronto at your service, which is how we should be able to report our noise complaints. And so we're also very happy to collaborate with Civic Tech Toronto, Esri Canada, University of Toronto, Toronto Metropolitan University, Gasbusters, Quiet Communities, and others. So I have a special relationship with the University of Toronto. One of the reasons why I chose Esri software was because I knew that universities used it. And I love working with students. I love working with young people. I find they bring an energy and insight and a perspective that I don't have. And so over time, we've had 4 geography students, 2 environmental science students, and now Patrick is the lone political science student. And they've all gotten a credit for this course, which is a professional work experience course. And below are some of the examples that you can see. On the top right is a buffer analysis of how many people live with 750 meters from a highway or 100 meters from an arterial road. We also did the Not 311 noise report, and there was a deep dive done in that data. We enriched it with weather and days of the week and all kinds of good stuff and did heat maps. And then on the website, on our No More Noise Toronto website, you'll see a heading that's called Noise Sources. And each one of these pictures here is basically a story map, which is an Esri product. But students have built these as well. So I am just thrilled to be working with them.
All right, so thank you so much for joining this presentation. So what we're gonna do today, as what Ingrid has mentioned, is to look into the law. What exactly it's those law that we can actually better handle them, and then to actually look into it and to bring changes to our city. So I think for the past few months, if you joined No More Noise Toronto meetings, basically you know that we have delved into public health issues about noise. We have delved into noise camera and also the small claims court, right? So today we're gonna look into the internal institutional mechanism that can actually help us to tackle noise pollution. So but before I get started, I think it's good for me to introduce myself first. So my name is Patrick, and some of you might have already seen me before because I've joined several meetings before. I'm from University of Toronto, and I'm doing my political science degree, master degree there, specifically focused on political theory, and I research on peace, nonviolence, conflict studies, and political communication. And you might think, oh, they're irrelevant to noise, but you know, actually is not completely irrelevant because it's also about conflict and how to live with people in a diverse background. But I think like many of you, actually, I also have my own noise story, and I don't like noise as well. Now I'm struggling with the streetcar noise, near my dorm. So, and I hate noise. Maybe it's because I'm from Hong Kong, and actually I live on a very quiet island, which is called Chao. I'm not sure if someone have been to there before, but there's no any vehicles, so we travel by bike, and that's why it's pretty difficult for me to basically cope with this urban cacophony when I moved to Toronto. So I think it's extremely, extremely important for us to really look into the law, right? So, and that's why later on I'm going to specifically talk about the three levels of government, the federal government, the provincial government, and the municipal government. What are they doing, right? Are the law, there are laws that can actually regulate, noise. Are they actually doing that? Are they failing us? What are those emission, the sound test, what are those? Are they effective in terms of enforcement? We will answer this question later on. And then I will maybe propose some possible solution as well. What can we do next? What should we do in order to carry out change in society? It's gonna be hard because we have like an entrenched culture of noise, and then every people we just wanted to enjoy our life, and it's gonna be hard to push for changes within a city. And lastly, I will talk about more like a philosophical investigation. Since when that we actually like noise so much, right? I think that's the questions we have to think about and reflect about it. How can we foster change? Is it by education? Apart from law, what can we do, right? So without further ado, I think it's good for me to start to talk about the law, right? So whenever we try to talk about the law, I think it's important for us to know that there are different nature of laws and regulations. And especially when we're talking about the noise regulations, we have to know the target of the law, right? So the law can target at the safety of the vehicles or the driver's behavior. So two types is, okay? So the first type, the safety of the vehicles, it's more about mechanical elements of the car. Think about the window, the wheels, the engine, and if we're talking about noise, definitely the muffler, right? So, it could cause problem if, our muffler is not working in good condition, if our engine is not working in good condition, we will affect the safety of your own vehicles and also the safety of the road, right? And if it's talking about the driver's behaviors, then, the law is targeting at the individual behavior, right? If you actually push the engine and accelerate it and produce aggressive noise, right? So you can think about, like, for example, the testing of the alcohol level, see if you are drunk driving, right? That it's targeting at the driver's behavior. So two types of laws here, and it's very important because actually different types is, I mean, on different levels of government, they are regulating, they have different sort of regulation and laws, right? But they focus on a specific type, or they do both. Whether they can target at the vehicle safety, they can also target at the driver's behaviors, or they can do both. Okay, so on the federal levels, it has the motor vehicle safety regulation. It's pretty old regulation indeed, and is enforced by Transport Canada. Later on, I would talk about it. And the federal level really focus on vehicle safety. Okay, and we have the provincial levels as well, right? So the Highway Traffic Act, enforced by the Ministry of Transportation, the police, and the MTO. The MTO is like a agency under Ministry of Transportation. Later on, I would talk about it. I'm not sure if someone already seen MTO agent on highway sometimes. Later on, I will talk about it. But the province is actually tackling on both the vehicle safety and drivers' behaviors. And lastly, we have the municipal levels. I think many of you familiar with it because No More Noise Toronto focus more on the municipal level, municipality, right? The noise bylaw, and it's actually regulated by police and the municipal licensing and standard team. So the municipal level is actually targeting at drivers' behaviors. And I think it's important for me to point out that although I put police here in the enforcement part, right? But when the police are actually investigating noise, they're actually, using the Highway Traffic Act. They are not using the noise bylaw. So later on, I would talk about why, okay? And part of the reason is because road is actually a product of the province rather than the city. Later on, I will talk about it more. So first of all, let's focus more on the federal government. So I think the federal government, it has the motor vehicle safety regulation. As what I've mentioned, it focused more on the vehicle safety, right, rather than driver's behavior. And Section 5 specifically, they term it as Noise Emission Standard 1106. I'm not sure why they term it that way. It makes me feel like it pretends to be a noise test, but indeed it's not a noise test at all. It's just the name of the regulation. But be it known that it only target at vehicles before sale. So they're not on market yet. They're not moving. They are not on the road. They are actually targeting at vehicles before sale. So more about the certificate stuff, the licensing stuffs, okay? Whether your car actually, during the manufacturing stage, whether it's test in a good condition and it could be work. And the law is very complex because different types of weights of vehicles use different sound tests. Okay, later on I will simplify it. I will not show you the entire law. And most of the sound tests, how they actually they restrict the sound level, right? But how does the sound test actually work? And most of the sound tests were designed by a company which is called the SAE company, SAE International. It's like a global professional association that develops standards and guidelines used in automotive, aerospace, and commercial vehicles industries. We don't have our own sound test. Canada doesn't have our own sound test. We use the United States standards, or we use international organization standards. And that could be a problem, okay? I will go back to this point later on. And lastly, the Transport Canada actually oversees this law, okay? So basically, Section 5 divides into two types of vehicles, the motor vehicles and the motorcycles, right? And for the motorcycles, there's like a decibel restriction between 78 decibel to 81 decibel. And noise tests, how they test it, they use the United States Code of Federation regulation, the SAE standard J1470, which is the company that I've just mentioned. And lastly, the ISO 3621 2015. And for the motorcycle, there is a larger range between 70 decibel to 80 decibel. The reason why there's a large range is because, engine varies a lot between different types of motorcycles. You can think about those motorcycles used by Uber drivers, right? Which is the engine definitely is much less than those that are used for race, right? A car race, right? So, and it's tested by the U.S. Code of Federal Regulation Title 40, So basically, you can see that the noise test here, they're using 1980 version. So it's it's a very, very old noise test indeed, given that, technologically we advanced, so much, and then we're still using 1980 version. The problem that we don't have our own noise test is because we cannot amend it. Okay, we have to wait for other countries to amend it, and we just cannot do it, even though we know that some of the tests might be in error. Some of the tests, when they collect the data, they might not be very accurate, and we cannot amend it because the law states that we have to use other countries or other companies' noise standard. And that's the question we have to think about. So how does the test actually run? So I specifically extracted J1470. Most of the sound tests actually look the same, with some measurements, varies, but they look the same. So basically, you can see there's like a circle. So the circle is like the clearance area. You have to make sure like there's enough space for you to test it, not blocked by winds or any obstacles, right? And the testing area is the shaded part. Okay, and specifically in the middle between the red line and the green line. So right here, I think you can see is that the microphone, I placed it at the center sideway, right? And when the vehicles actually start, the vehicles actually will start moving at the tip of this shaded area. So, oh, wait. Um, okay. So basically is that the vehicles move from the left to the right. And then when they reach the tip of the shaded area, they will start pushing the engine. And when they reach AA, they will be in full acceleration. And then the microphone will start record to see the change of the sound. Okay. And then when they pass BB, the green line, okay, and then the car will slow it down. So the highest number of, the highest emission will be recorded. So I think we can ask two questions for this law. The first one, I really wanted to know this, but Transport Canada didn't really reply to me. They never replied to my email. So the first one is who conduct the sound test, right? So Transport Canada sent people to test it, or actually they have certified engineers within the car company to test it. We don't know. And it's a huge difference. You can think about, if they have certified engineers during the manufacturing stage, they can test it, they can turn a blind eye on those sound emission, right? They can go easy on it. But if it's tested by Transport Canada sent people there and then test it, it might be stricter. And the second question is, does every vehicle need to undergo the test or selectively? It's hard indeed to imagine that, vehicles need to be own vehicles need to be tested from a business point of view, because, of course, in manufacturing, you want everything to be fast, efficient, effective, and high with very, very high productivity, right? So if you send the vehicles for testing, then it costs time, right? So I think that's the question we have to think about. It's also about enforcement questions. So, but it's yet to be answered by Transport Canada. And so that's basically the federal government. And next, it's about provincial government, right? So the provincial government is what I've mentioned. They regulate both the safety of the vehicles and the driver's behavior, right? So the Highway Traffic Act specifically, Section 75, includes a relatively small section about noise emission. Okay, when compared to other issues like drunk driving, tinted windows, there are a lot stated. But when they talk about noise emission, you can even count how many words they used. So it does not actually specify any use of noise tests, surprisingly, unlike the federal government. So you don't know how to test it, basically. Okay, they talk about noise, but you don't know how to test it because there's no specification of noise test. And the Ministry of Transportation oversees this law, and the Toronto Police Service, the TPS, the Ontario Provincial Government, OPP, and the Transportation Enforcement Officer, MTO, enforce the law. So 3 agents. So I've mentioned the MTO. I think many of you are familiar with the TPS and the OPP, right? You can see many of them on the road, right? But the MTO is like part of the Ministry of Transportation, but they have very limited power, although they are actually trained with how to test the vehicles. But they can only investigate commercial vehicles. So that's the problem here. And I think there's also the limitation of the MTO is not just restricted to the MTO officers, but also to the police officers. And that's because of 2 reasons. First of all, I think, we're in a democratic society, right? And individual rights should be protected. I think this is not contestable. But the problem is that Section 9 of the Canadian Chapter of Rights guarantees the right to be free from arbitrary detention and arrest, and its purpose is to protect individuals from unjustified police interference. I think it's justifiable, right? We don't want police to suddenly lock on our door and then just catch us, right? But the problem is that because of this law, when the police are actually enforcing noise law, they need to be extremely cautious about it. What does it mean when you were saying, there are unnecessary or unreasonable noise, right? If I pull you over and then you accuse me for infringing your freedom, then that's a huge problem. So the police seems to be, because of the unclear definition of what is noise and how to test it, then they are very cautious in terms of enforcement. And be it also known that is that, when compared to, for example, drunk driving, right? It causes serious consequences. But in terms of noise, if you do the comparison, the police might think that, oh, it's not gonna cause huge problem, right? But we know that noise is a pretty serious problem, right? It affects our sleep and it affects our psychology, our mental health as well. So that's a huge problem as well. So there's like a balance to be made here between individual freedom and also, democracy, right? So I think this is like a philosophical dilemma. It's often, and this question, it's like debatable. Like within, I'm studying political theory, and every political theorist is still debating on this. How can we define, harm, that kind of thing. So, but that's the question we have to know and we have to think about. And the second problem is, why it's hard to enforce is because the police just have limited knowledge on how to test the vehicles and identify unsafe muffler. They don't know. They don't know how to do it, basically. So that's a problem. So what does the Highway Traffic Act talk about? So the regulation on muffler, section 75.1, it states that all vehicles must have a muffler that is in good working order and it's constantly operating and prevent excessive or unusual noise and excessive smoke. So if you violate this law, you have to pay 85. Okay. And there are specification on what a muffler are prohibited. So because of time, I will not go over all of them. Maybe just touch on it superficially. So they have like a muffler cutout and a bypass. So basically is that the exhaust gas will bypass the muffler and then directly released. So it causes huge sound. And there's also like a gutter muffler. So gutter muffler is that, you have a muffler and then they take away all the substance that are used to absorb the sound. They take it away so they produce aggressive sound. So this picture is actually captured from a forum full of people who love this aggressive noise. So they say, love it, right? Love this gutter muffler, okay? So, and then we also have the strict exhaust. So I think it's very common, right? I'm not sure if I think someone might have already seen this on the street, or it's known as a strict pipe. So basically, it's that exhaust systems without a muffler, and then the exhaust gas basically produced from the strict pipe. And lastly, we have the Hollywood muffler as well. So basically, it's like a muffler that will produce a extremely serious, aggressive noise. So these are all the mufflers that are prohibited. The law state this. The law mentioned all these kind of mufflers, these types of mufflers. But of course, there are many, many, many. And they can, of course, adjust the mufflers. They can actually, technologically, we're in like, we're just in an era of technological advancement. So, of course, they can have different ways to, you know, uh, to change the mufflers. Okay, so okay, and next is about Highway Traffic Act. So the previous one is more about the safety of the vehicles, right? So now turns to the behaviors of the drivers, right? So basically is that it states drivers must not create unreasonable noise, right? And also you cannot cause the vehicles to make unnecessary noise. So we ask the question, what is unreasonable? What is unnecessary? So these are words that should be defined by the court, right? But the problem is that the police doesn't know this, right? The police don't know this, and they have to actually figure out. And what I mean is that because of the unclear definition, actually, it's very hard for them to enforce the law. And if technically speaking, legally speaking, if they violate this law, then they have to pay 85 as well. So the Highway Traffic Act also allow the police officer or the enforcement officers to actually deem a vehicles as unsafe or dangerous. So basically it say that, oh, you should not drive these vehicles anymore because it's unsafe. And they can even ask you for repair. You have to repair certain mechanical part of your car, and then you have to ensure that, it's in good condition so that you can, drive on the car subsequently, right? And then they can inspect your car, and to ask you for the certificate or the proof that you have actually repaired the elements. But definitely we know that practically speaking, would they do it? We're not sure. So, and then it comes to the municipal government. Okay, so I think we're more familiar with municipality, right? So we will always ask a question, or we will always mock at the municipal government. Like me, like at the very beginning, I always talk to Ingrid, why they have such limited power when it comes to municipal government. And it's a political reason behind. There's a political reason behind. It's because constitutionally, the city is not protected by the Constitution. The Constitution protects and recognizes the rights of the province, according to the Constitution Act. And the city is actually a creature of the province. So you can imagine is that you are not independent and you relied on some people. Okay, the city relied on the province, and that's why the province allows the city to handle stuff about, streetcar, TTC, the subway, right? And the hygiene, the waste collection, more like local district stuff, but not your driver license or your or the or a noise pollution because of moving vehicles. Okay. So that's why, municipal government actually has a pretty limited power. And I think, if you go to the noise section in the city level, you can see that they have a pretty negative attitudes on noise, although actually they did so many things to actually help us. So basically, it sets noise as normal, so please accept it. In a city as large and vibrant as Toronto, certain levels of noise are reasonable and reflect life in a densely populated city. Okay, so you have to cope with it. And then they utilize a priority action approach as well when they tackle noise pollution. Basically, what I refer here is that the city staff actually investigate general, larger case rather than your individual or, a specific case. They will handle it, but later on, they have to prioritize. So under the noise bylaw, as what I've mentioned, they can only test vehicles that are stationary, which is not moving, because moving vehicles fall into the categories of the Highway Traffic Act, right? So the noise bylaw can only regulate vehicles that are stationary. And if they produce unnecessary noise, uh, you know, then the police can actually test it. So unlike the Highway Traffic Act, this time the term unnecessary is defined. So the definition is any noise or sound-induced vibration that would disturb the peace, rest, enjoyment, comfort, or convenience of a reasonable person in circumstances. So it seems that they define what is unnecessary, but then there are many words that are not defined. What is peace? To what extent that it disrupt my rest, enjoyment, and comfort? So it creates more questions rather than really clearly define it. So you can think about how can the police actually enforce this? And they have it has like the sound restrictions between 92 to 96. Later on, I will go into details on this. And the police department enforce it. And if you violate it, the law, then you have to pay $500 to $800. So I'm gonna look into how they conduct the test. Remember, only stationary vehicles. So they use the SAE J2A25, the company that I've mentioned previously, right? So they actually have a updated version, which is in 2020, but they're still using the 2012 one. So 8 feet of clearance, and then they place the microphone, the levels meters placed at least 50 cm from the exhaust outlet and measure for 10 seconds. And then they ask the drivers to idle the vehicles for 10 seconds and see if it's over 92 decibel. And then ask the drivers to bring the engine any speed above idle. for another 10 seconds and see if it exceeds 96 decibel. A vehicle is tested for both conditions, even if they failed on the idle test. And if they fail one, they will get a ticket. All right, so basically it's how this test run. So that's pretty much summarized the municipal government, what they can do, right? But I think you can see there are many tension between among the three levels of government, right? And that's why I think, for next steps, what we can do, perhaps we can think about how can we, perhaps we can investigate more on how they can cooperate. Three levels of government can better cooperate. In terms of noise tests, in terms of enforcement, how can they better cooperate to address gaps and improve regulations? And secondly is to investigate ticketing in vehicles for safety or noise. If it's focusing on the safety of the vehicles, it seems that we can avoid those philosophical problems about your personal infringement, that kind of thing. Because, if you were talking about drivers' behaviors, then you will fall into the questions about those questions that political theorists ask every day, right? I'm not saying that you shouldn't ask this question, or, I'm not having an answer here saying that, drive noise, if it's about drivers' behaviors, we should ignore it. Definitely not. I'm not suggesting this, but I'm saying that if we focus more on vehicle safety of the vehicles, maybe, just maybe, it's easier. Okay. So, but we have to definitely, first investigate, if the law it's focusing on the safety or the driver's behavior. And next is about to assist the city of Toronto in getting permission for province for a noise camera pilot. We all know that the city cannot, it has limited power. They cannot actually install the noise camera without the permission from the province, and they need money as well. So we should assist the city for doing that. And next is about noise culture. How can we, using education or our daily exemplary action, to show people the problems of noise culture? I think that's something difficult because it's not something that you can do within a day, and it's going to be a long-term thing. How can we do this? And since when did we like noise a lot, right? So I wanted to talk about something philosophical here. So it's not going to be abstract. It's going to be very direct in case I delve into very academic stuff. So I want to introduce a person. I think many of you know who he is, and he is Gandhi. So if not, I will have a brief introduction about Gandhi. So Gandhi is a barrister. He studied law in London, and I think he's best known because he is the father of India, leading India for independence using non-violent means or resistance. And he basically established the foundation for the classical nonviolence. And the reason why I introduce him is not because he specifically talk about noise. It's because he loved silence. He observed silence on every Monday. So basically, he won't speak on Monday. Of course, this is like a political tactics in resisting the British government. But there is like some other reason behind. I greatly suspect that Gandhi hate noise. So this is the quotation. I have often tolerated meddling noise which could have been easily avoided. I'm aware that they are injurious to health. In railway trains, this noise are simply meddling. They are made in total disregard of the feelings of the fellow passengers. So this is what Gandhi said. So at that time, the British government wanted to civilize India by introducing railway, by connecting different parts of India, and as an act of civilizing the Indians, right? So that's why Gandhi think that noise is actually a problem. It's actually affecting people. It's other regarding behavior, which means it's not just about yourself. It's about you were doing something that actually it's harming others, right? Although it's not physical, but it could be mental, it could be psychological. So Gandhi recognizes this. And why? Why there's noise? Gandhi accused civilization for producing noise. It's because of civilization that we concentrate more on our bodily pleasure, on on something that are more selfish, rather than caring about others. We are living in an inclusive society. We have people around us that we should actually take care of them. And it's because of civilization underscores more on efficiency, effectiveness, and then we lost ourselves. So I will not read the entire passage, but he says, this is considered the height of civilization. Men will not need the use of their hands and feet. They will press a button and they will have their clothing by their side and the motor car will be in waiting for them. Pretty much, touch on, in an era of AI, right? But I think it's also accusing civilization for actually making all of us less care about others. And you can think about why we actually accelerate the engine and then we produce now very loud noises because we found it extremely cool and awesome. And be it known that if you are with inside the car, actually you cannot hear the noise when compared to those people that are standing outside the car. So that's the problem. Okay. And what's the solution for Gandhi? Of course, it's very theoretical and philosophical. He asked for Swaraj. So Swaraj is there is a lot here for Swaraj, but when it's talking about, if we translate in English, then that's about self-control. How you could be able to, even you have like you are in the civilization, there are machineries, how can we be able to resist, not being trapped by the civilization, by the machineries? Gandhi is not saying that we have to resist machineries as what he said. What I object is the praise for machineries, not machinery as such. He is not saying that, oh, we just basically exclude all machineries, we just back to the natures, and then we just use our hand and feet. Gandhi is not suggesting this, but if we are to become the servant of all these kind of machineries, then there's a problem that we are controlled by the machineries rather than actually using ourselves as a limiting agency. So the idea of doing something that we don't want to do, such kind of definition of freedom, very Kantian, if someone read Kant, then this is what Gandhi is suggesting. So self-control. How could we be able to? Um, there's like a temptation, right? But how can we be able to limit ourselves to achieve freer agency? So that's what Gandhi criticized noise and civilization. All right, so I've touched on the nature of the laws and three levels of governments and laws: the federal government, the provincial government, and the municipal government, right? And I've also touched on some problems, enforcement problems and the relationship between the city and the province, right? And lastly, I also talk about the development of machineries actually creates noise culture, as suggested by Gandhi. Okay, so and with that, I think that's it for my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.